Hello there, welcome to Business Daily, coming to you live from Trust Television. We are set to bring you up to the minute with updates from the world of business, finance, commerce, trade, and the stock market is not left out. I am Christiana Amodu Otinya. Thank you for always keeping a date with us on the program. First, to begin with the headlines, and we'll start from the aviation industry. Air travel, airlines to pay $222 billion extra for fuel in the year 2022. Now to the United States. U.S. consumer inflation, CPI up 7.1% year on year. We're going to bring you more updates in the business roundup segment of the program. However, I'll take a short breather. When I return, time to go into the stock market. Please stay with us. Welcome back. Now let's get straight into the stock market. To begin from Customs Street in Nigeria's commercial hub, talking about Lagos State. The Nigeria Exchange shared 0.09% as the all-share index settled at 48,853.54. Now we saw that the profit-taking and weak investor sentiment contributed to the dwindling of stock watch. Now that's what we're seeing affecting the sentiment on the Nigeria stock market. On activity levels, now a total volume of 162.98 million shares valued at 3.87 billion naira changed hands in 3,285 transactions on the floor of the local bourse. The equity cap settled at 26.60 trillion naira. Remember, a lot of eyes are focused on Nigeria Statistics Agency, talking about the National Bureau of Statistics. We're expecting the inflation figures for the month of November to come in this week. Although I was speaking to a professor of capital markets sometime in the week, and he did say that the Nigeria stock market continues to shrug off concerns around inflation, and we have seen the stock market still largely bullish for some time, unlike what we are seeing happening in other parts of the world. Talking about other parts of the world, let's go over to other African bourses that will bring to you on the program. The JSE in South Africa shed 1.28% there to settle at 74,867. For Ghana, the Ghanaian bourse also in negative zone, down 0.10% there at 2,459. Remember, South Africa, there's been a whole lot going on in South Africa, talking about issues around the Fala farm of President Cyril Ramaphosa. Scandal around that has also come to the fore, and the issue around power outages. Now we're seeing a lot of concerns have been raised, especially as it relates to South Africa's utility company Eskom. Now that has been in the news for some time, and also investors on the stock market continue to monitor developments from those straits. Let's go over to the US now and see what's happening over there. Now the US CPI came in cooler than expected, and we are seeing the markets react to the consumer price index in the United States. That was one of the biggest data that the market was looking forward to in the week. Now the Dow Jones Industrial Average, the S&P 500, the tech-heavy NASDAQ Composite, all in the green as a result of the fact that it may seem as though inflation in the U.S. has peaked and inflation will begin to come downwards. 0.20% there for the Dow, the S&P 500, a climb of 0.73%, and the NASDAQ climbed 1.10%. So we are seeing the gains from Tuesday enter into midweek trade in the United States. Let's go over to the European straits, European stocks. Also, we are seeing the stocks in Europe slip, especially in midweek trade there. The FTSE 100 in the UK down 0.30%. The CAC run in France, the CAC 40, down 0.28%. And for Germany, the German DAX is down 0.38% at 14,443. So issues around the greens we are saying in the US is not really dovetailing down into the European zone. And we also saw that UK inflation, on the other hand, dropped from a 41-year high as fuel price surge eased in the United Kingdom. Now let's go over to the Asia Pacific region and see what's happening in that strait. Now it's still positives for the Asia Pacific markets. Markets are reacting to second day of gains from a cooler than expected inflation numbers. Also, there was a delay in a key economic policy meeting that was supposed to hold in China as a result of issues that have come up from the COVID-19. The Nikkei 225 in Japan, the Shanghai Composite in mainland China, down to the Kospi in South Korea, all staying in the positive zone. Let's also remember that all eyes are also focused on the U.S. Federal Reserve. What is Jerome Powell going to say? Now, investors and analysts at Morgan Stanley have predicted a 50 basis points increase to come from the U.S. Fed. The U.S. Fed has been aggressive, just like all the central bankers around the world, in terms of trying to rein in inflation. Inflation has really been the name of the game for economies around the world in recent months to ensure that living standards get better. We saw that a lot of central banks became hawkish, and that is why we are saying that a lot of analysts are saying from when Jerome Powell speaks today, it is expected that the rates will begin to moderate, and that will bring some kind of green sentiment into the markets. Let's go to the commodities angle now and see what the prices are like for commodities. For the international benchmark of crude oil, that is Brent crude, $80.60 per barrel. Now, oil prices slipped in early trade on Wednesday as industry data showed the big build in U.S. crude inventories, now 0.09%. They're down for oil prices. Brent crude oscillating around $76.80 per barrel. Definitely not uhuru yet for oil producing nations like Nigeria. We know how the oil and gas sector has been marred severely by issues around oil theft. So oil at $80, definitely more needs to be done in terms of economic diversification into other commodities. Talking about other commodities, we'll come to the down of this chart. Palm oil, wheat, and cocoa. Now we are seeing palm oil and wheat in negatives, and cocoa is in the positive 1.59% up there at $2,491. A lot of people will say, juxtapose this price you have at this benchmark to cocoa and palm oil. How about the nation return back to the glory days of agriculture being a mainstay of the economy? Definitely a lot of economic watchers, experts have said, okay, this progression is going to be a marathon and not a sprint. But Nigerians are waiting to see results, especially coming in from the agriculture sector. Let's look at the cryptocurrency market. What's happening with the cryptocurrencies? Bitcoin is up 0.19% at $16,960. Ethereum up 0.03%. They're marginally $1,276. And Binance is shedding 1.92% there at $2,296.02. I beg your pardon there. So a lot has been happening also in the cryptocurrency market. Issues around FTX, around Binance, all of that coming to the fore. And that's what is also affecting sentiment. Let me also mention that investors in the market are also monitoring what's happening with economic data, inflation, and also decisions coming in from the U.S. Federal Reserve. Those are the numbers we have to crunch on the program for you today. Now let's move on and give you a roundup of business stories. Take a listen.
The International Air Transport Association has revealed that airlines will pay $222 billion extra for fuel this year. IATA's Regional Vice President for Africa and the Middle East, Kamil Alawadi, in his address to the 2022 General Assembly of the African Airlines Association taking place in Dakar, Senegal, said although oil prices have retreated from mid-year peaks, the average price of jet fuel so far this year has been $138.8 a barrel. According to the IATA boss, this means airlines would collectively pay an extra $222 billion for fuel this year compared with 2021, adding that fuel accounts for 30% of airline costs. United States stock futures rose over 3% after consumer inflation eased in November, warranting a less hawkish Federal Reserve and bringing some relief to policymakers, according to government data released on Tuesday. However, the figure is still about 3 times the pre-pandemic pace. The Consumer Price Index (CPI), a closely watched measure of inflation, jumped 7.1% from a year ago, down from 7.7% in October, according to the figures released by the Labor Department. On a month-to-month basis, the Consumer Price Index rose just 0.1% in November, down from 0.4% in October. SP 500 contracts jumped as the Nasdaq 100 futures added more than 4%, while the policy-sensitive two-year Treasury yield sank more than 15 basis points.
Welcome back there. A roundup of business stories for you. The focal point of the program today will be on Nigeria's tax revenue and national development. A lot has been said around how can Nigeria create a nexus between revenues generated from tax that will also help boost socio-economic development of the country. And there's also the Hydra-headed issue of tax evasion, bringing more people into the tax net. A lot has been said about how basically the issue of Nigeria's taxation system can be made better. I am being joined on the program today by Dr. Victor Ahonse. He's the country director Oxfam International, and he will be speaking to some of these issues around taxation in the country. Doctor, I want you to speak to how would you rate Nigeria's taxation system, looking at the tax regime all around? How would you rate the system?
I think Nigeria is one of the countries that are not taking advantage of a robust taxation system. Nigerian tax system is still rudiment. Nigeria currently captures about 12% of accruable taxes, and Nigeria has one of the lowest tax to GDP ratios in the world, yes, at just 3.6%. And with a debt portfolio of 44 trillion naira, and the country looking for revenue, I think taxation is where the government needs to look next. And the government needs to really put on the thinking cap and see what has been going on with taxation in this country, how can we make it better, what innovations can be brought in if we can actually get that revenue that we need to better the lots of Nigerians. Okay,
a lot of strong points there you have raised, Doctor. However, we'll hold our horses here and take a short break. When we return, the conversation will continue and we'll talk more about taxes. A lot is said about the man a lot of people don't want to come knocking on their door is the tax man, but paying your taxes at this point have become inevitable. Don't go anywhere. The program continues shortly. Please stay with us.
Now, as part of efforts to support Africa's goal of strengthening...
Now, looking at the activity chart, as you can see right here, a total volume of 130...
Created a Boko Haram crisis that at that time was restricted to Yobe.
How secured are they? You can see security men with blood.
This is the road leading up to the...
Really, if you look at English squad, you are looking at EPL, you are looking at their names. You are not looking at...
Welcome back and thank you for still staying there with us on the program. If you're just joining in, this is Business Daily coming to you live from Trust Television. And I still have my guest with me in the studio. He is Dr. Victor Ahonse, the country director, Oxfam International. Welcome to the program, Doctor.
Thank you so much.
It's a pleasure to have you join us on the program. We were just speaking about, you mentioned issues around how the tax system in Nigeria can basically become better, whereby more revenues can come into the coffers of government through taxation. And I want you to speak about how this can be done holistically, because beyond doing things in pockets here and there, how can it be more holistic that there can be a marriage and ultimately mean more monies for government to run the country?
Thank you so much for having me. One, the name is Dr. Vincent Ahonse, not Victor.
Oh, apologies.
I think you have to look at the context of Nigeria. Nigeria has been over-dependent on the petroleum or extractive industry for too long.
Okay.
We have done this over the years, and it has taken us to a point where we say, okay, there's a lot of loss of revenue through either stealing of the fuel or stealing of the petroleum, and we don't have enough money anymore.
Yes.
And as we speak, as of September 2022, Nigeria debt portfolio is 44 trillion naira.
Correct.
And between January and September 2022, Nigeria spent over 3 trillion naira to service its debts, not to pay the debts back.
Yes.
And if you know Lagos State very well, Lagos State is a state that we have that is touting itself as the 5th largest economy in Africa. And the budget for Lagos State for the year 2023 projected is 1.7 trillion naira.
Yes.
And for a country to spend over 3 trillion naira to service debts, that is to pay interest, so to speak, on debts for a period of 9 months, there is a big problem. This is concerning. And this is a country where you have less than 40% of its population having access to quality health care.
Yes.
Over 20 million children are out of school. And that is more than the population of Senegal and Gambia put together. Now Nigeria has a problem. Now, what do we do? Look at the medium-term expenditure framework presented by the Honorable Minister for Finance in September to the Senate Committee on Finance. It's projected that the government is going to, the budget for next year is going to be about 19.7 trillion naira, out of which over 12 trillion is going to be by deficit financing, which simply means it's going to be borrowed. Nigeria doesn't have the money. And worryingly enough, over 6 trillion naira is projected to cover for fuel subsidy. And on that over 6 trillion as tax waivers, as tax incentives for corporations. So what are we saying here? Here is a country deeply in debt. Here is a country financing its budget through deficit financing, which means borrowing. And at the same time, you are putting over 6 trillion naira aside, projecting that you are going to give it as tax incentives. So that shows you the kind of tax system we have in Nigeria. The rich are getting richer. They are not paying their fair share of taxes. So the government is concentrating on VAT, VAT, VAT. And if you know VAT very well, this is the tax regime that affects the common goods and services, that affects the common man on the street.
Yes.
Now the one that affects the big boys, so to speak, the top 1% of the pyramid is being left out. The company income tax is 30%, that is fine. But the Corporate Affairs Commission has come forward and told us that out of over 68 million companies that are registered, less than 20 million pay taxes. And if you look at the way the taxes are being captured in Nigeria, it is salary employees that are paying most of the taxes.
Correct.
Right? A lot of these big corporations, a lot of these very rich billionaires that we see around, they have their ways of playing on the loopholes in the tax laws and tax edits. So they pay either little or no taxes. So if Nigeria is going to come out of this quagmire that we have found ourselves, we have to look at it holistically. One, there should be no tax waivers. There should be no tax incentives. Let the corporations, the spirit or the context behind it is that when you give tax incentives, they will create employment. This will bring in more revenue, and whatever they gain from the tax incentives, they plug into the system. But that is not the case.
Yes, because Dr. Vincent, I was also going to ask you that, because looking at the picture, a lot of these companies will tell you we do CSR, we build roads, we do a lot of things, we create employment. Now, because I read your speech, and your speech clearly stated that you called on the government to remove tax concessions to rich individuals and corporations. How do you think this will further better the situation?
Now, like I said, the logic was if you give tax holidays, tax incentives, these corporations will be able to make more money easily, be able to plug it into the system. But where is the job they are creating? Unemployment is getting more, so they are not creating jobs. Two, you cannot get a tax incentive or give tax incentives of 6 trillion naira only for a few people to say, oh, we constructed a road from Okokomaiko to Navy Town. That is not what we're talking about. It is not working well. The system is broken. It is not transparent. That is why I personally support the position of the Senate that, look, these tax incentives have to be stopped. If you have to ask for tax incentives, please come out in a transparent manner. Let us see what you want to do with it. Confront the representatives of the people. tell them what you want to do, and at the end of the day, there's going to be a monitoring matrix and say you collect X tax rebate, and at the end of the year, we want to see what we do with it. But now it is shrouded in secrecy. Nobody knows how much is being given in tax incentives. Nobody knows what the recipients are doing with it, and we are not seeing the effect. The CSR, you cannot come and do a CSR of 1 billion naira, and you spend another 500 million to do some, publicity for that 1 billion, CSR. And you come and you say, I've done something and we have lost 6 trillion. That is not how it works.
Doctor, some have postulated that if this stance is taken into cognizance, it might bring about an issue of more tax evasion, or these corporations or organizations that are supposed to invest in Nigeria, taking these investments somewhere else. What are your thoughts?
There is this myth that when you don't give tax incentives, or some things are not in place, that investors will leave your country. No, the most important thing that pulls investors is one, security. Everybody wants good security for their investment, for their personnel, for their resources. 2, the market. Nigeria has the market. Nigeria has the population. Nigeria is a consumer country, right? So investors naturally want to go to Nigeria to invest. So if you can take care of all this, it is fine and well. But you don't have to, on top of all this, the money you are supposed to use to provide security, to provide the roads, to provide the infrastructure, you can't give it as tax incentives. Well, at the same time, you keep borrowing to finance your budget. Borrowing to finance budget, and you say Nigeria is rich. There's something not adding up here, right? And we are saying that the government needs to step back a little bit. Even let's hear from the presidential aspirants, so to speak. Yes. How do you want to solve this problem of Nigeria debt burden? We are in a serious problem in terms of fiscal position. That is just the basic truth. We cannot continue to, as if nothing is happening, as if all is well. Yes. We keep borrowing, thinking that one day we'll borrow ourselves out of our problems. It doesn't work that way. Another thing is we have to look at is, one, the billionaires, they made so much. There's what we call inequality. Yes. Inequality in Nigeria is so widened. The rich are getting richer, the poor are getting poorer. The top 1% are making so much money. Just 2 Nigerians at the top, they are richer than 63 million Nigerians at the bottom. That is the basic truth. And 3 Nigerian billionaires, they made as much as $6.9 billion for the first 18-20 months of COVID-19. Yes. All of us made a loss, but they made more money. So they increased their wealth by 38%. And we say now, let's just stop disturbing the people at the bottom of the ladder for a bit, right? Let's look at the people at the top. Can you just say, okay, for example, let's introduce a wealth tax, which is it's like a security tax. Can we have a wealth tax that is progressive, where there are Nigerians who have up to $5 million in investments and resources, and we have about 4,960 of them. Just put 2% wealth tax annually on their wealth. Then those who have over $50 million in assets, just put 5% annual tax. And those who have over or up to $1 billion, put 10%. From that alone, the government will be making a handsome $6.1 billion annually. And for example, and in addition to that, we are currently losing about $2.9 billion annually to tax incentives. Add them together, you are talking in the region of almost $9 billion that the country needs to repair the roads, to fix the schools, to fix the hospitals, that will affect the majority of the people. We need to be pro-poor. The agricultural system is broken. What do we do? Nigerians are hungry. And the only way out is for us to look at a robust and way of making more money. Let's stop looking at fossil fuel. The world is moving away from fossil fuel. And Nigeria can go back to that.
Doctor, breaking away from the oil spill, I like to put it like that, because like you have stated, although I don't know how feasible the wealth tax will look, but is indeed something that should be called on the table, especially when conversations around revenue generation come on board. Just before we go, I want you to state one key challenge now, beyond looking at the bourgeoisie, those at the top that really the work needs to be done from. Let's look at the small business business owners? How do you think compliance level can be increased?
I think looking at the small business owners is like you are living where the real, it's like they say in Yoruba first, you leave the big issues and we're talking about the big, the smaller issues,
yes.
right? Let's start from where we can really get the money, where we can get a chunk of it. Another thing we are losing sight of here, during the COVID-19 period, some countries came together with the World Bank and the IMF backing them. They call them the G20, and they set up the debt service suspension initiatives, right? And in that initiative, over 70 countries were qualified, right, to have their debt servicing suspended, pending when they are recovering from the COVID-19 pandemic. Nigeria is one of the qualifying countries, but we did not take advantage of it. Instead, we continue to borrow to finance our debts. And that is not good enough. It is high time Nigeria, out of moral grounds, out of everything, you have to approach these multilateral donors and say, look, Nigerians we have 133 Nigerians who are now poor. To fix their problems, we need to suspend our debt service as long as it does not affect our debt, our credit rating.
Thank you so much, Dr. Vincent Ahonsi, the Country Director, Oxfam International. Thank you for coming on the program today to shed more light on how basically we can bring in more revenues through taxation. We hope to have you come talk more on the program in subsequent times.
Thank you for having me.
And that's where we draw the curtains for the program today. Of course, it is pertinent to begin to look at other means as we seek to diversify the nation's economy to generate more revenue. Don't forget, you can get all the updates on our social media platforms on news breaking in the polity and also news from the world of business. Trust us to give you all the important news as they come in. I am Christiana Amodu Otinya. Thank you for investing your time with me and continue to stay safe. Bye for now.